Hello everyone, I'm Kenan Proffitt. Welcome to another Blender Branch tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to create an island environment. And there's many steps we're going to cover. First of all, you're going to learn how to create an island environment and mix image textures to texture that island up. As well, you're just going to kind of see some complex scene workflow tips all along the way. So there's a lot to do, and if you stick through it, you'll end up with a great piece of art that will look great in a portfolio. So let's get right into it. Here we go, new scene open in Blender. Hope you have some coffee and yeah, are ready to roll with this. Just gonna clear my camera, move it over to the side, rotate it by 90 degrees, and bring it down a bit. My scene is cleared, so I'm gonna press Shift A, go to Mesh, and we're going to use the landscape add-on, which if you don't have this enabled, just go to your user preferences and type in landscape and you'll see it right there. And while you're at it, make sure that the sapling tree add-on is checked because we're going to be using that later on as well. Alrighty, so now my cursor, I'm going to put it back to the center, Shift S, cursor to center. If I press Shift A, mesh, landscape. And you can see we have this little island right here. And you want to make sure you adjust all the settings on the bottom left hand side before you actually do any scaling or anything like that inside of the viewport. So we're going to change a couple of these settings. First of all, I'm going to change the type from multifactorial to FBM just because I like that setting because it has sort of a flat beachy area and we want sand on our island, so I like the settings for that. So yeah, that's the reason for that. And let's see, you can play around with the random seeds a bit, and this just different options. And it's all up to you what you want your island to look like. I think I like number 4 right here. Again, I want that smooth beachy area, so I'm gonna go with something that doesn't have texture all over. Okay, some of these settings, really you can play around with them and see what they do. The depth, if you increase that, is sort of, if you decrease it, smooths it out, increase it, really makes it bumpy. The default settings truly for all of these are really pretty good. So I'm not going to adjust too much of them except for the mesh size. I'm going to change that to 6. So that's pretty big, and actually let's go 4. And that kind of smooths things out more, spreading things out. And the height I'm going to increase till I see something I like. That's pretty good. Yeah. Nice. Now I'm mad I might check through the random seeds to see what other options look like. That's kind of cool too. It's all pretty fun with just trying to figure out what you like. This little landscape generator is a pretty fun add-on to play around with because there's all kinds of options. Hey, that's kind of cool. I think I'm going to stick out with that one. Decrease the height a bit. Yeah, cool. Okay. Now what's next is just to increase the subdivisions of this. So I'm going to change it from 64, and I don't want to go too high just because it slows down your rendering time, and we're going to add a subdivision surface on top of that. So let's just go a value of 102, and you can see that brings out a lot of the resolution. So that's very cool. And now I'm just going to press S and 3, scale it up by 3 times to make that pretty big. And we'll just sort of position it where we want. I think this smooth area right here, I sort of want the beach, so I want that facing my camera. So I'm going to press R, hold down Control, and just rotate that, just so it's kind of a perfect diamond there. And yeah, that'll create a nice beach front facing our camera. And now it's all about positioning the camera where you want it, how you want your shot set up. Think about right here. That'll be pretty good. All right, and now comes the fun part where we have to add in the water and decide which part of this mesh is going to be submerged and which part is going to be above water. Coffee break. All right, So cursor to the center, once again by pressing Shift S, cursor to center. I'm going to press Shift A, add in a simple plane, and drag it a little bit beneath that island. I'm going to come over here to our modifier panel with that plane selected, add modifier, and we're just going to use the ocean modifier. If you've never used this modifier before, it's a lot of fun, and yeah, you can quickly get some pretty good results. I'm trying to find my sticky note because I have specific settings here, because believe it or not, this is the third time I've recorded this tutorial, so I'm trying not to mess up here. So size, we're going to go a size of 0.5, a scale of 0.4, and that just takes down those wave sizes. The reason we're kind of shrinking it down is we want the scale to be really in proportion to our island. So in other words, you don't want the waves to be too big and all that good stuff. And you can even decrease the amount of smallest wave, which is sort of, you know, the lower that number is, the smaller of those ripples and that kind of thing you're going to get in your scene. So more detail. And I'm going to, for now, just go to a resolution value of 22. So nothing too high. Because again, I hate working with a slow viewport. So now what we're doing is just dragging up the sea level, basically, because you don't want that plane being shown at all. Actually, what we should do, I'm just going to press Tab on our mesh. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, depending on if you're on a Mac like I am, and then Shift Option, and select each of these edge loops. And then what I'm going to do is turn on proportional editing and just drag down just a little bit so that that sort of bottom layer of vertices is submerged. And I might even scale out a bit just to spread it out some. Not a whole lot. But again, we're going to create kind of a beachy area. So now what I'll do is drag up that shoreline. And then with sculpting, we'll sort of decide which parts are submerged and which are not. So with this mesh selected, before we do any sculpting, I want to add on a subdivision surface. And just go a value of 2. And that's good. And now with that selected, I'm going to go sculpt mode and flatten. And you can see it might be doing the opposite of whatever you want it to do, and that's because our normals need recalculated. So I'm going to go to edit mode, press A, shading UV, and recalculate. And so now with this flat brush, I'm going to sort of be able to flatten out which parts I want to be a beachy area. I'm going to increase the strength and the radius. And yeah, just flatten this out so it doesn't look like a square mesh. Oh, we have symmetry locked on. I don't want that. By default, for some reason, it locks on this symmetry here. So just uncheck that. And yeah, sculpt away. Sculpt your island. I know this basically already is a sculpt or a sculpture, I guess. But you know, everything needs modified. Can't always trust a preset to work for you perfectly, because it never does, it seems like. I might actually even use the blob brush, increase the strength of that. And the blob brush, you know, obviously blobs up, and I don't want that. So if you hold down Control in sculpt mode, it does the inverse of whatever the brush's default settings are. So I'm doing this just to add detail to the shoreline here, just to break up that smooth, yeah, the smooth, I don't know what you call it, edges. So yeah, I'll speed this up and you won't have to watch me sculpting, and I'll get it how I like it and you get your island how you like it, and yeah, check it out. Alright, so I have my island how I want it. Really the important thing is to have a nice beachy area, because we're going to add sand, and to make sure it's interesting from your viewport. So you want a shoreline that's broken up and, you know, looks random, because that's going to make it look more realistic. And I might submerge a little bit more of it. And now that I have my water and my island in place, I'm going to position my camera and my lens how I would like them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press G and S and pull way back, pretty far back, scale up. And the reason I'm pulling back is because I'm going to use a zoom lens. Currently the focal length is 35, which is pretty wide, but I want some compression in my scene, especially since we're working with the ocean modifier that has the tendency to look kind of fake. If you use a zoom lens, that'll compress the waves and all of that together, and it's really more realistic because that's how a nature scene would be shot. So really, anything from about 75 to 200 really could be used for a focal length. I'm going to go 75 and then just reposition my camera. You can see already the compression that occurred. Our waves got a little more realistic. And yeah, it's just going to help with the overall realism of your scene. And you can always adjust those values. Now what I'm going to do is double the size of our ocean modifier because I want it to scale off into the distance. So I'm going to go to our modifier and have it repeat once in the Y direction, because that's that green arrow right here, Y direction. And just bring it a little bit closer to the camera. Or I guess we didn't really need it to be that much closer. That'll be good. Now I'll just do some final camera adjustments, or I shouldn't say final, just more camera adjustments. And yeah, there we go. It's looking great. Even scale your island slightly. It's all up to you. I'm going to apply the scale because I like that right there. So I'm going to press Control A, scale. Good. And yeah, what's next? We want to add a good sky texture. So what we're going to use is just the default sky texture inside of Blender. So I'm going to change my timeline to the node editor. That's sort of the space I always use for my node editor, so hope you like it. I'm going to go to my world panel settings over here, check use nodes, and our background node setup appears. And if we press Shift A and texture, sky texture, and just plug that into the background. And now if I go to rendered view by pressing Shift Z, I'll show you what that looks like. And ta-da, we have a beautiful sky with a nice horizon in the background. And honestly, the horizon is a little too high for my liking. I don't really like that green band. It kind of tends to give away the fact that we use a sky texture. So the way we adjust that is to drop in a texture coordinate and mapping node. And I always forget where those are. Okay, input, texture coordinate, and where's the mapping node? Vector, yeah, vector mapping node. Okay. And we're going to use the generated output from the texture coordinate, because our sky texture is generated, and plug the vector of that mapping node into the sky texture. And now what we can do with this location value right here, if we just, I'm holding down Shift, by the way, and that helps me adjust these increments better. If we play around with that Z value, we can actually just adjust where our horizon is. So 0.5 is good for me. That works. Great, we have now changed the horizon. Yay. But it still looks really boring. So we want to add some clouds. So the way we do that is very easy. If we just go Shift A, color, mix RGB, drop in that between the sky and the background. And now Shift A, texture, noise texture, which back in the day used to be called cloud texture. And now plug the factor of that into the factor of that, mix RGB. And it might be pretty faint, but hopefully you can see clouds. Maybe if I turn this down, you might be able to see it better. No. Well, they're there. Okay, if I zoom out, you can definitely see it there. The clouds, yeah. And we can adjust the size of them by this scale value here. So I'm just going to go 12 for now. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Nice wavy clouds. But they need to be crisper, more realistic. So we can adjust that by dropping in a converter and color ramp node in between there. And if we just adjust these values, you can see we have, the more black we have is the more blue we have up here. So these values, the more white, the whiter those clouds are. Obviously that looks pretty blotchy and terrible. So if we just add another checkpoint there in the middle by clicking plus, we can sort of smooth out the clouds and make them look, hazy like, I guess. You can adjust how much cloud you want versus how much sky you want. And if linear sort of stops right where the checkpoint is, we can change that to B-spline, and that sort of softens that out. And we have hazier, kind of softer clouds. So yeah, I don't want too much cloud in my scene, just sort of enough to, make it realistic. Okay, but we have a problem. And the problem is the clouds go everywhere. So if we zoom way out, there are clouds just everywhere. That's not true in the real world, because generally clouds are going to stop at the horizon. So the way we fix this, and I learned this from Enigma Tools, so credit where credit is due. He did a tutorial on putting clouds on the sky texture. So I learned how to block off this the clouds from that. So the way we do that is I'm going to duplicate this Mix RGB node by pressing Shift D, drop that in there. And now what I'm going to do is press Shift A, go to Vector, and drop in a normal map. And if we take the dot value of this vector and plug it into the factor input of this Mix RGB, you can see everything turns to whiteness. And it's because we need a coordinate for this dot value. So if we take the same vector output from our mapping node and plug it into the factor of that, and the dot of this normal needs to go into the bottom of that color ramp node, or that Mix RGB. I'm getting my words all mixed up. And we change it from mix to multiply and set the factor all the way to 1. Now if we zoom out, you can see the clouds stop right where the horizon is. But now we have more problems for ourselves because they fade a little too soon. They fade right up here, and that's sort of right before we actually want them in our scene. So you guessed it, the way to adjust that is another color ramp, converter, color ramp node. So drop that in there. And now we can sort of adjust where and when those clouds disappear. So I'm just dragging that white value over. And now they still disappear right at that horizon line, but we're able to actually see them more. So this black value sort of determines, if I go all the way up, hopefully you can see that the skies disappear, the clouds disappear. So we want them disappearing right about there. Perfect. And I'm going to leave that one on linear because you actually do need it to stop, not really keep fading. So linear would be better than B-spline in this case. And yeah, now it's all just about playing around with what looks good for your clouds. I think that looks excellent right there. I'm pretty happy with that. We just need a little bit of texture in the background for our clouds to make our sky texture look realistic. And this is extremely useful because the default sky texture is really handy in Blender because it enables you to not have to use an HDRI, but you still get nice even lighting in your scene. But I think obviously the reason we don't want to use it very often is it tends to be really obvious, so you're just using a sky texture. But once you add clouds using this method, all problems sort of go away. Shouldn't say all problems, but a lot of problems. I'm just playing with the scale of this noise texture just to get different results. I think I like that right there. Okay, hopefully this made sense. I'll just show you that node setup so you can, make sure you got it there. And yeah, it's really easy, just a noise texture mixed by a Mix RGB node with a sky texture. And then we use a normal node to determine where the clouds stop right at the horizon. So yeah, that's done. We are done with that. So I'm going to give ourselves some more space here. And now would be an excellent time to go ahead and save your island. Save your island, claim it for your own. If Blender catches up, okay. Island, once again. Yeah, you can see all my other project files there. Like I said, done this once or twice already. Okay, so now we need to get into lighting and the actual texture of our mountain. This is exciting, so I'm going to select this mountain, and we have to UV unwrap it, but Don't be scared because we're just going to use very simple method. Select everything from the top, press U, and project from view. So we're just projecting top downwards. And because we're using a rock texture, it'll map over perfectly fine, and you won't really be able to notice that we didn't do any fancy UV unwrapping. We just did top down. So that'll be fine. I'm going to drop in an image texture, and we're going to use two textures from cgtextures.com, this rock sharp texture and this soil sand texture. So I'm going to open the rock sharp, and I'll have the link for these textures in the description of this video, whether you're watching it on YouTube or blenderbranch.com. I'll have it both places. So now if we press Shift Z, you can see we have rock, and it looks dreadful, but it's mapped pretty well. You know, there's no noticeable tiling going on. So now let's just select that object, go back to our actual material panel, so this cube, and we need to increase the scale of our rock. So I'm going to press Shift A, go to Input, Texture Coordinate, Shift A, Vector, Mapping, drop those in, take the UV output this time into the mapping node, the vector into the vector of that image, increase the scale, probably a value of about 12, I think, would be pretty good. Yeah, nice. Okay, and now what we're going to do is mix this image texture with sand texture. So I'm going to press Shift A, go to Color, Mix RGB, drop that in between the image and the diffuse. I'm going to duplicate this image texture node, press Shift D, and I'll just click that File button and open up the sand texture and plug that into the bottom of that Mix RGB. Now currently they're just mixed 50%, so all the way 0 is the rock, all the way 1 is the sand. So we need a way, and I'll just go ahead and plug the vector into that sand to make it the same scale. But we need a way to determine which parts of our mesh are sand and which are rock. So obviously anything on this shoreline we want to be sand, anything in the middle we want to sort of fade to rock. So how do we do that? Well, glad you asked. We're going to use a mask, and we're going to create a mask using texture painting, which is a lot of fun and I get pretty excited about. So I'll show you how to do it. We're just going to split this window here. I'm going to leave this side on object mode, and I'm going to hide our water for now so we can see the exact size and scale of our mesh and give ourselves some more room here. I'm going to change this left hand side to the UV image editor. I'm going to check new image, and let's just name this sand mask. We're going to uncheck alpha and hit OK. Now with this object selected, if we just press tab, we can see all our vertices come up here over just a black abyss. So we're going to paint areas of white onto this black image, and whatever we paint white is going to be sand on this side, and whatever's left black is going to be our rock. So if I change this view on this bottom side right here to paint, and we can press T to bring up our toolbar. By default it should be set to text and draw, and this works just like any paint program. I'm going to decrease my brush radius to about 20, and the paint stroke, let's turn the jittering up just a little, 0.13. And we sort of have to look at our mesh here and determine, you know, where do we want there to be sand. So the sand really comes all the way up here, you know, sort of this general area, and everywhere that's sort of high is high up here, we want to be rock. So you really just have to eyeball it and sort of map out where you want to be sand. The great thing about this is it doesn't have to be perfect at all, because it's just rock and sand and all that. So but yeah, let's just paint away. Again, everywhere that's white is going to be sand. So you know you want, I could probably make a bigger brush size for this part. You know you want all the edges to be sand, because that's going to be submerged underwater, and obviously that part is all sand. So you can at least do that much. Apart from that, you sort of really have to eyeball where on this mesh is sand and where is rock. I'm repeating myself, so I'm just going to be silent and paint away. Well, maybe not silent. Some coffee here. Hope you like coffee because it makes great art greater. Not really. Yeah, it's just painting along here. Nothing fancy. Just creating your mask. And if it's not perfect, you know, if we apply this mask and you realize, it's way too much sand or not enough sand, you can always come back and start over or adjust your current mask. It's all really up to you how you'd like it. I'm going to, let's see, I might have gotten a little overzealous here. We want to make sure this part right here is rock. So what I'm going to do is change it from mix to subtract and just subtract some of this sand right here. Now change it back to mix, add some all along here. Okay, that's pretty good. That'll be random. Now what we have to do is go to image and save this image, and the name is already there for you, sand mask, so save as image. I'm just going to go to see what am I going to do. I'm going to drag this up and I'll press Shift Z on our mesh here. I'll look at it through the camera. And now if we change this bottom view to the node editor, so currently what we have is our two textures here mixed together using a mix RGB, and now we're going to use this mask we created to determine where is sand and where is rock. So I'm going to press Shift D, duplicate this top image texture, and open wherever you saved that mask that we just created. So I have a lot here. Sand mask. This is the one we just made. I'm going to open that. Take the color output and plug it into the factor of that mix RGB, and da-da! You can see everywhere we painted is now sand, so sand's coming up on our island. Everywhere else is rock. And that's great. Needs to be adjusted a little bit, maybe. Maybe I got a little too overzealous, too much sand right here. So you can adjust it. Now you have to keep in mind this doesn't need to be perfect by any means because we're going to add plants and trees and all that good stuff. So a little sand bleeding over is not going to hurt a ton. If you want to fix things like that, you're welcome to just adjust it over here and resave the image, reload it in, all that good stuff. I'm going to leave it right there because I'm not too picky. And I don't want this tutorial to get any longer than it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is just change this to our 3D view. And now what we have to do is adjust this sand texture based right here. So what I'm going to do is grab these over, and from our mask that we've dropped in right here, if I press Shift A, converter, color ramp, we can sort of adjust how much of this, the thinner that gap is, the stronger that sort of edge is. Obviously you can reverse the two. But I want sort of a gradual fade because sand gets blown all over the place. So I'm going to change it to B-spline and separate these out pretty far. And that makes that sand texture really fade into the rock pretty smoothly. And that's good. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, our island is coming together. Now we have to see what this looks like with our water. So I'm going to press Alt-H to bring back our water and make sure we have a nice beachy area. And we do. That's pretty good. You might need to tilt your camera down slightly to sort of be able to see just how much of that is sand, how much is rock. It's all up to you. But now let's get on to the water material. So what we're going to do for this is just select this water, drag this out, check new material, call it water, and I'm going to Where's our material? There it is. Wow, it's really zoomed way out there. Okay, so I'm going to delete this diffuse, press Shift A, add in a shader, mix shader, plug that into the material output. Shift A, shader glossy, and shader glass. I'm going to plug the glass into the top of the mix, the glossy into the bottom. Change the IOR. The IOR of water is 1.33. Change the roughness to 0.02. And change the factor to 0.25. The factor of this mix shader, 0.25. Hello, 0.25. Okay, good. And we can just see what that looks like by pressing Shift C. And that's a pretty good result right off the bat. The reason I didn't put any color is because it's very reflective, and it's gonna reflect our clouds and sky texture. And so that's how we automatically get that nice blue. You can adjust this color if you want your water to be a little bit darker. That's all entirely up to you. Okay, so now obviously something that's missing is light. We have nice even light all over our island, but that's not good enough. So we need a sun. So I'm going to come over here to sort of the back left side of this island, press Shift A, go to lamp and drop in a sun. I'm going to grab it up and rotate it, pointing to the top of that peak. I want it hitting that peak right there. And go to front view, rotate it so it's doing the same thing. Dun, dun, dun. It's always fun to rotate your sun from several different angles. Getting it just right. Okay, perfect. It's hitting that peak right where I want it to. And yeah, that'll catch light nicely. I just noticed we have sort of an interesting thing going on with our island. Maybe if I rotate it a bit. Hey, look at that. Our island got even more interesting. See what that looks like. Yeah. Fun. So rotate your island if you don't like how it looks. You might get cool results. Okay, with this sun selected, I want really sharp shadows hitting this rock because that's going to help it look more realistic. And yeah, it just will emphasize what time of day it is. Maybe it's late afternoon, so we have sharp shadows. Maybe it's early morning. Either way. So the way we make our shadow or our sun cast sharper shadows to decrease the size of it. So I'm going to value of 0.001, and I'm going to crank up the strength to about 12, and let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, now you see really sharp shadows hitting that island, and already just with that light, everything about our scene is really coming to life and becoming more realistic in appearance. So that's fantastic. So that's good. And what you can do if you would like is duplicate this sun, bring it to the very dead center, rotate it around. You don't have to do this. It's all up to you depending on how you want to light your scene. But I like to do this sort of just put a sun in the very center, change the size to 2, and let's see. Yeah, okay. Change the size of this one to 2 and the strength to 2. And what that'll do is sort of be our fill light and fill light back onto our island. Because obviously the sun would reflect off of water particles, it would reflect off of the ocean and everything in the air and cast light back at it. So that's all we're doing with this second light, is creating a fill light. So this one is sort of our main kicker, hitting the island, causing those sharp shadows, and this front one is our fill light. Yeah, and I might take the strength down of that to 1, just so it's not too strong. Yeah, I like that. Okay, what's next? We have to make our island look a little more realistic, because currently it just has that image mapped over top of it. So what I'm going to do is select our island, and we already have this node setup created. Let's give ourselves some space here to work with. Another sip of coffee here. Good stuff. All right, so now what we need to do is just apply some general modifications to the overall mesh here. So after the diffuse, I'm going to go Shift A, Shader, Mix Shader. Nothing in the real world is ever 100% diffused. Probably heard that before. So drop in a glossy node, take the factor way down, 0.02 might work, and see what that looks like. Now our rock is catching some light and reflecting a little bit because nothing is 100% diffused, especially that sand. That sand needs to reflect light, so we have to have a little bit of glossiness, maybe 0.018. That's pretty good. Okay, so we want to add some displacement. So I'm just going to do some quick and dirty displacement here. I'm going to take the color output of our rock image texture and plug it straight into the displacement of our material output. And now you can see that already makes it look realistic. We add some bumps and ridges to our rock using that. And if it's a little too much, what you can always do is press Shift A, add in a math node, drop that in, change it to multiply. And now this value here, how great that is, determines how much bump and displacement there is. Value of about 0.4 might be good. Again, we are using a compressed lens. We're going to be at a distance, and you're not going to see the island up close. So you want to make sure there are a significant amount of bumps and ridges and all that good stuff. Even if you think, man, I wouldn't ever do that much for a normal scene, it's a little different whenever you're creating kind of a far away image. Okay, so that's pretty good for now. We can always come back to that later if we don't like it. For now, what we have to move on to are our trees. So we need trees and plants and brush and all that good stuff on our island. So yeah, let's get right into that. I'm going to go to a new layer, go to front view, press Shift S, cursor to center. Press Shift A, go down to curve, add tree. And this is another fun little add-on that you should have enabled. It's just the sapling add-on. And we're going to check bevel once and not change any of the resolution. And now I'm just going to spread out this ratio a bit to make a pretty good trunk. We're going to make 3 different types of trees. We're going to try to make something that resembles a palm tree, and then another just generic tree, and then a shrub. So yeah, I've extended the ratio to 0.5. Now if I change this from geometry to branch growth, branch splitting, we want to increase the base size so that all the branches are at the top, because this is going to be our palm tree. And now what we can do is go to branch growth, and this vertical attraction value right here, if we put that into the negative, that sort of spreads those branches down, and that's going to resemble our palm tree. And we can increase the length, the second value of this length here. If we spread that out, that makes our branches a little bit longer. Okay, now finally what we're going to do is go to leaves and change the amount of leaves to just 10, because we're going to put these trees into a particle system, so they're going to be extremely low poly, so we don't want a lot of geometry. And if we just check show leaves, now all that's left to do is to increase the scale so that it looks horrendous. For the palm tree, let's leave it on hexagonal, that's fine. Yeah, there you see, we have our low poly palm tree. Take it or leave it. I might adjust, if I go to branch splitting, if I adjust the base size, take that up to about a 0.90 or 0.89. There we go. That'll look a little bit more like a palm tree with those branches just sprouting out at the top. So now we're going to create our generic tree. So I'm going to press Shift A, curve, add tree, check bevel, and increase the ratio here to make kind of a fatter trunk. And this is really, I know, just kind of quick and dirty tree work here. Now if we, I'm getting distracted. Branch growth, if we increase that second value here, just have those branches spread out. And now that's going to be good enough. I'm just going to check show leaves, change the amount of leaves to 10 again, and increase the scale. And there you go. Perfect generic tree. Yay. All right, so now we just need kind of a shrub. So I'm going to press Shift A, add tree, bevel again, Um, and this time we're going to use a preset, the black oak right here. That'll look like a shrub. So I'm going to pick a random seed here. There we go, that looks pretty good. Check bevel, and we're not going to really do anything other than just go straight to the leaves for this one. Change the value to 8 and increase the scale. Oh, show leaves. And there we go. Scale really big for this one because it's just a shrub. And yeah, that's perfect. Hopefully I didn't go too quickly there. Obviously it's just kind of playing around, make a couple generic looking plants, and we're going to use a particle system to distribute these over the island. Alright, so now let's adjust the materials. We're just going to add really simple materials to each of these. So I'm going to check use nodes with the leaves selected on my palm tree here. I'm going to go to just change this first color to a dark green, about right there. That's fantastic. I'm going to go shader, mix shader, drop that in, add a glossy node, drop that in with the mix shader, and I'm going to check this preview window here because that's really going to be what I'm looking at. You can press Shift Z, but you're not going to get a very accurate idea of what that looks like because we don't have any, we're on a separate layer, so we don't have any extra lighting set up. So this preview window over here is what I'm going to go by for this. I'm just going to decrease the factor of that glossiness because you want to go pretty low, so I'm going to go 0.008 because you don't want it reflecting too much light because, again, we're going to have a whole bunch of these everywhere. If they're all just reflecting a bunch of light, it'll look really silly. So I'm going to press shader or Shift A, shader, add shader, go to a shader translucent and plug in the translucent to that add shader, and the color from the diffuse into the translucent. So now light will pass through these leaves, but they'll still, have the same green texture. Okay, great. Now I'm just going to select the trunk of this, or I want to make sure this material is named. So I'm going to call it palm leaf. I'm going to select this trunk, create a new material, call this bark. And really all we're going to do here is put a brown color. For the palm tree, I might, actually, let's get a little fancier. Let's go color, mix RGB, drop in the color into the diffuse, press Shift A, texture, noise texture, take the factor of the noise into the factor of that mix RGB, and now let's pick kind of a tan and brownish color. That way, it's a little more interesting looking. Looks a little bit more like a palm tree. Okay, great. Everything's set to go. I think take the roughness down on this glossy node. Yeah, that'll be good. All right. Now all we have to do is select these leaves for the second tree. And from our drop-down menu, let's go palm leaf. It'll use that same material, but we want to adjust it. So let's click plus and just change the color to just kind of a different green. Something a little more interesting. And now let's check that bark and just add the same bark material and do the same for our shrub. So I'm going to go, when we changed this material, we had to plus it because that duplicates this whole material but allows us to edit it as its own material. So let's change the name of this. I'm just going to call it leaf. So now I'm just going to have this shrub share that same leaf material, leaf, but I'm going to change it to a different color. So plus again and shrub. Okay, now we can just adjust this color for the shrub. Let's go throw a yellow color, and that'll be the plant that's kind of dying on the island. Okay. Fantastic. So now these all have their own colors. Now we have a problem here with our translucent shader because currently all our leaves look a little funny. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to our palm leaf and see if we can fix this problem. If I go Shift A, color, mix RGB, and drop that into the diffuse, and let's do the same thing we did for the bark. So I'm going to just do a simple noise texture And now take two green values and see if we can mix those together. Create some more interesting leaves. And I'll take the color of that into the translucent. There we go. Now we have color back into our leaves. So light will still pass through them, but it'll look a lot better and our leaves will be a little bit more interesting. So that's great. Let's do the same for these leaves. Sorry, should have done this to begin with, but thought I could get away with just the diffuse, but I guess not. You should never try to be lazy. That's my I don't know. That's the lesson we learn here. Don't be lazy when it comes to artwork you're trying to create. Okay, that looks good. That tree's a little more interesting there. Let's do the same thing for our shrub. Noise texture, color, mix RGB. Factor of that into there. Change both of these to sort of dark throw-up-y colors. And take the color of the mix into the translucent. And there we go. Way more interesting that way. All right, fantastic. So now all that's left is to create a group out of these trees. But in order to do that, we have to join them all together and convert the base of these to mesh. They're all just curves still. So if we, with the base selected, go Object, Convert to Mesh. Now what we can do is hold down Shift and select the leaves, press Control J. And now this tree is all one object, one mesh. So let's do the same for this tree. Object, Convert to Mesh, hold down Shift, Control J, and now that's one mesh. And the same thing, I believe the shortcut is Alt C, Convert to Mesh. And now we can join these two together, Control J. Excellent. Now we have to scale them all way down. So what I'm going to do is scale them sort of how I want them in proportion to each other. So the palm tree you want really to be the tallest, and obviously the shrub to be the smallest. So I'm just kind of make the shrub shrubby, the palm tree a little like that. Okay, excellent. I might scale them all down even further because compared to our island, they're actually pretty big. Okay, great. Now with all of them selected, let's join them into a group by pressing Control G, and they are now a group. So let's go back to our island, and with this island selected, we're going to paint where we want there to be trees using weight paint. So with the object selected, I'm going to change it from object mode to weight paint mode, and currently it should be set to draw, which is perfect. And I'm going to, with this mesh selected, I'm going to uncheck the subdivision surface. And that'll allow us to work a little bit quicker. And now what you want to do is basically just pick wherever you want there to be trees or shrubs. And yeah, just paint away. So I'm going to increase my radius here. And you really want it to come pretty close to the beach in most of these cases. So yeah, it's all up to you. Wherever you want there to be trees, wherever this red color is, that's where there are going to be trees. And you can see that if I go to this vertex group tab here, this group was just created because of our weight paint. So yeah, that's the group we're going to use to determine the density of our particle system that we're going to put all our trees into. Okay, so you can get as creative as you want with where you want there to be plants and shrubs and all of that. I'm just going to sort of, I'm making sure there's trees where the low ground is, first of all. But you also want to make sure there's a fair amount of sand still visible. So don't get too carried away. And yeah, you can always adjust this later on. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to decrease this brush size and sort of go smaller strokes like this. Make sure there are trees on these peaks here, just not a ton. And again, this helps cover up our quick and dirty mask texture, image texture job that we did. Sort of covers it up with plants and trees and all that good stuff. All right, excellent. That's pretty good for now. So I'm going to go back to object mode and just name this group over here trees. Okay. Now with it selected, if we go to particle system, check new particle system, name it trees, and change it from emitter to hair. Now we have hair coming out of all over the place. But if we go down to vertex groups and underneath density, if we check that, you see we have what we weight painted, that group we just did, trees. So now that hair is only coming out of where we've painted. So there's far too many, so I'm going to change it from 1,000 to just 100. Okay? Now underneath, I'm going to check advanced also. And right here underneath the render settings, we're going to change it from path to group. You want to make sure you select pick random, and we're right here where we choose our group, that's the group we created out of our 3 trees. So I'm going to select that, and da-da! We have trees applied all over the island, and they are all timbered. They've all been cut down. So we have to change the rotation. So this option will only be here if you have advanced checked. So if we check rotation, drop that menu down, change it from velocity to global Y, they should all be sticking straight up. And that works because these all, if we press Control A, apply the scale and the rotation of those are all sticking, straight up. So a little note here, if for some reason your tree is halfway submerged into your mesh and it's not at the base, the base of the tree is not at the top of the mesh, then what you need to do is change the origin point of each of your objects. So currently you see if I click each of these, the origin point is at the very bottom, the very base of the tree. And that enables them to be properly sticking out at the right spot. So if for some reason your tree is halfway submerged, what you'll need to do is select this bottom layer of vertices, press Control S, cursor to selected, and then press, and then go to Object, Transform, Origin to Geometry. And that'll change the origin point to the base of the tree. Just a little tip there. I know I've had that problem before and it took me a long time to figure out how to fix it. So if you don't have that problem, ignore everything I just said. All right, now what we're going to do is our trees are still a little too big. So I'm going to select all of them and hold down Shift and select that first layer. And now we're just going to scale down these 3 trees. And that'll scale down everything in proportion to how we would like it on the island. So it might help to look through the camera to see how big you want your trees and your shrubs. Somewhere maybe about right there. That'll be pretty good. Now I'll just go back to the mesh, and underneath our particle system, what you can do is increase the Brownian a bit, and that sort of adjusts the overall different size of each of those. You can do things like adjust the drag slightly and the damp. And you can also adjust the random size a bit if you would like. And that just breaks up the uniform of those 3 trees being the same scale in proportion to each other. Okay, so I'm going to go size of 0.05 and a random size of 0.3. And that'll be good. Now what we want to do is add children. So first of all, I'm going to check how this looks using a box render. So I'm going to press Shift B, create a box around those trees. I'm going to turn my subdivision surface back on, so check that little eyeball. And now if I press Shift Z, you can sort of see how that looks. And maybe you think the trees are a little too small. I think mine are. So I'm going to go to my particle system and increase the size. I'm going to go value of 0.07. That'll be good. Now we want to turn on children, so I'm going to go interpolated underneath the children tab. And there we go. Now we have way more trees all over our island And that's looking great. I think there needs to be more trees right around here. So what I'm going to do with this mesh selected, I'm going to go to weight paint. And yeah, I'm just going to sort of paint in proportion to where my camera is, where I think there should be more trees. And you can see the mesh catching up and sort of adjusting the particle system around, which is kind of fun to see. Pretty cool. Just because I felt like that part of the island was getting sort of sparse. And I might paint a little bit up on this peak here. Take some more trees up there. Yeah. Alright. I'm going to go back to object mode. And I want to increase the number of trees. And also an important thing, we have children set on to interpolated. The display is set to 10, but the render is at 100. So if you were to render this, you would get 10 times the amount that you see here. So I like to match these two numbers. So I'm going to go 20 for each of these, just so I don't have any surprises when I I do my final render. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to increase the overall number from 100 to, let's go 140. Total amount there. And let's press Shift Z, see what that looks like. All right. There you can see our island is really coming to life with all the different trees and brush and all that good stuff. It's becoming way more realistic looking. What are some notes we can sort of take away? I think the scaling is pretty good. However, I think the color of some of I believe it's our kind of generic tree. It's a little too green, in my opinion. And that's kind of funny for a tree. But you don't want it to look fake. So I'm going to take that tree, go to the node editor. And basically what I'm going to do is just kind of darken these a bit. Change this one. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Change that back to the timeline. And let's see what that did for our render. I think that helped. Again, I think maybe it's the palm tree where that green sort of color is kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to go back to the palm tree now. And this is where you just have to, make these adjustments. It gets kind of silly and a little ridiculous at times. But you just have to do it because it makes a big difference. Those little adjustments can have a big difference on how realistic your island looks. And obviously nature is something most of us see every day, so it has to look right. I think I want to add some more trees sort of right around here. Maybe not so dense right here, just kind of break that up. And I think I also want to adjust the scale of them. So I'm going to select our object. I'm going to go back to weight paint mode. And let's give ourselves some more space here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hide the particle system. And I'm going to turn the weight all the way down and sort of decrease some of this paint in here so that it's not so dense through there. And what I'll do is go object mode and look through the camera now. Go back to weight paint and sort of paint, turn the weight all the way up. Again, sort of add trees coming more of where I think they should be. And I might be just sort of redoing what I undid, but that's okay. It'll make me feel better about myself. Yeah, it's all about just making these final little adjustments, tweaking things here and there. And yeah, you'll be glad you did it because it's really what makes your island look realistic and come to life. This peak needs some trees back here. Let's go all out for that. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go back to object mode and turn my particle system on, see what that looks like. And I think I want to adjust the random size, turn the random size up a bit, even more. That'll break up sort of the uniform of that. And I'm going to take the overall size down to 0.60. Make everything a little bit, whoa, sorry, 0.06. Way too big. Yeah, make everything a little smaller, and that'll be fantastic, I think. So now I think what we're ready to do is give it a test render. So I'm going to save this. So I'm going to go to my render settings, go to the samplings, increase the samplings to 200, and we'll turn the clamp on, just a value of 5 for each of these settings right here. And underneath performance, let's go 256 by 256. And I'm going to get rid of my render box that I have, so Shift B, just go the whole camera here and select render. And it's looking pretty good. A few notes. I think I want to adjust the clouds a little bit. I think we could stand to add a few more trees and maybe decrease the scale just a touch. And yeah, so let's make those changes. First of all, the clouds. So what I'm going to do is hide everything in my scene that is going to take up space, which is everything. So I'm going to select my water, press H, go to our mesh and the particle system and hide the particle system. That'll enable us to not waste any time while working with our sky texture here. So I'm going to press Shift Z, and yeah, what I think I want to do is maybe increase the scale 22 and yeah, make those clouds, just adjust them so they're, I don't know, they were kind of looking fake, a little funny looking. So we'll adjust these. Happy clouds. Yeah, I like that. I might go smaller. I get kind of picky. Oh, the detail, we also want to increase the detail. That's what I was forgetting. Change that detail all the way up. 16 is the highest. And that'll really help your clouds. So that was my problem. Usually when I go to adjust something and then I realize I've just forgotten like the most important step entirely. So yeah, you want to make sure that detail is set as high as possible. And that'll really make your clouds pop and look nice. All right, excellent. Now let's go back to our island, and I'm going to press Shift Z, I'm going to bring my water back by pressing Alt H. With this island selected, let's bring our particle system back, and I'm going to increase the number now to 155. And now let's go to the children and change the display to 30 and the render to 30 as well. And that just adds more plants to our overall island. And oh, the last thing I wanted to do was decrease the scale just a touch. So right here where it says size, I'm going to go 0.058. Make that a little bit smaller. And just because I'm picky, I'm going to go to weight paint mode. And this little peak right here, I just want it to have trees coming out of the top. Yeah, that was it. That was all I wanted. Great. All right, and I think the final thing I noticed from our test render, the camera could stand to be positioned in a slightly different way. So I'm going to select my camera. Again, these are all just small little details. Let's see what that looks like. The test render. I think I like that better, the overall position. The clouds are looking a lot nicer, and I think we are ready for a final go at it. So what I'm going to do, select this mountain, make sure everything is unhidden. That needs to be. Bring our plants back. All right, and we're good to go. All that's left now, increase the samples here. We'll go about 500. You can obviously do far more if you're doing a final render. And I'm going to hit render. And when this is finished, we'll get into a little bit of compositing and final touches. All right, so there we go. It's looking pretty great. Let's just make some compositing changes. So I'm going to change it from default to compositing up here. Check use nodes and backdrop. Oh, use nodes. And in order to be able to see this, if we press Control, Shift, and click, we have a viewer node up here. And that's great. And we're not going to add too much. We're going to add a simple glare node. Just drop that in. That's just to add just some subtle little glow here of the sunlight. So I'm going to change the threshold to 1 and the mix to -1. Just kind of dial back until, obviously this is going to be subtle, but we want kind of the sunlight and the reflections in the water and the clouds to be glowing nicely. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to press Shift A, go to Color and Color Balance, drop that in. I'm going to boost the whites, make it nice and bright, sunny scene here. Change it to kind of a yellow, turquoisey maybe. Might be a little too bright. Okay, good. And now I'm just going to change the darks to a very subtle blue color, and then turn this down ever so slightly just to boost some contrast. You don't want to go too dark, which I think I did. Just want a little contrast boosted there. Excellent. And you could add a vignette if you'd like. This scene doesn't really call for a vignette because it's a landscape scene. So I'm going to do without. And I think that's good. Obviously, there are an infinite amount of changes you can make to your final render. But for now, I'm going to call that good. What I would do is increase the samples now to maybe 500 or a couple thousand. And, you know, I like to put a resolution at 100 when I'm doing a final render. And then just hit render. There are possibilities unlimited that you can do with your island. For instance, for my final render, I added some grass and changed the lighting around. You can do whatever you'd like, and hopefully you have the groundwork here for creating your own complex scene that will look great in your portfolio. So I hope this was a useful tutorial, and I will talk to you in the next Blender Branch tutorial. Thank you for watching.